Live from Spalding Auditorium on the campus of Dartmouth College, the Bloomberg Washington Post Republican presidential debate.
I'm Charlie Rose. Welcome to Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. This great college, established in 1769, in a state that often plays a crucial role in picking presidents. Tonight, it is the site of an important Republican presidential debate brought to you by Bloomberg, the Washington Post, and WBIN television. This is a time of anxiety about our country and our children's future in a continuing economic crisis. Many are in despair, not only about policy, but politics. And so we ask who has the character, who has the ideas, and who has the experience to lead. This debate is different and distinctive. It is only about the economy. So we debate this evening about spending and taxes, deficit and debt, about the present and the future, about rich and poor, and about the role of government. And because we're at a table, this is the kind of table I like, the kind of kitchen table where families for generations have come together to talk and solve their problems. The rules are 1 minute for an answer, 30 seconds for follow-up and rebuttal. If a candidate is singled out by name for criticism, they have 30 seconds to respond. Later in the debate, they will question each other. I'm the moderator. Joining me are Karen Tumulty of the Washington Post and Julianna Goldman of Bloomberg News. Joining us at the table, the 8 Republican candidates. They are former Governor of Utah, Jon Huntsman; Minnesota Congresswoman Michele Bachmann; Texas Governor Rick Perry; former Godfather Pizza CEO Herman Cain; former U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania Rick Santorum; former Speaker of the House of Representatives Newt Gingrich; Texas Congressman Ron Paul; former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney. I am pleased to be here at this table to have an opportunity to talk to them about the issues that all of us are thinking about. And I began this evening first with Herman Cain. As you know, when Standard & Poor's downgraded American credit, they noted not only the economic difficulties, but the political dysfunction. So we begin this evening with the question, what would you do specifically to end the paralysis in Washington?
2 things. Present a bold plan to grow this economy, which I have put my 999 plan on the table, and it starts with throwing out the current tax code and putting in the 999 plan. Secondly, get serious about bringing down the national debt. The only way we're going to do that is the first year that I'm president and I oversee a fiscal year budget, make sure that revenues equals spending. If we stop adding to the national debt, we can bring it down. So the answer is we must grow this economy with a bold solution, which is why I have proposed 999, and at the same time get serious about not creating annual deficits so we can bring down the national debt. That would reestablish confidence in our system, and I believe we could get our credit rating back.
Governor Perry, are you prepared, even though you've said that you want to make Washington inconsequential, to go to Washington and, as Ronald Reagan did, compromise on spending cuts and taxes in order to produce results?
Well, certainly as the governor of the second largest state, I've had to deal with folks on both sides of the aisle. I've signed 6 balanced budgets as the governor of Texas. So working with folks on both sides of the aisle and bringing ideas, whether it's ways to do your tax structure or what have you. One of the things that I laid out today, I think is a pretty bold plan to put 1.2 million Americans working in the energy industry. And you don't need Congress to do that. You need a president with a plan, which I'm laying out over the next 3 days, and clearly the intent to open up this treasure trove that America is sitting on and getting America independent on the domestic energy side. It's time for another American Declaration of Independence. It's time for energy independence.
We'll come back to energy as also your economic plan this evening, but I go now to Governor Romney. The paralysis is there, and everybody is concerned about it. What specifically would you be prepared to do to make the country moving again on addressing its problems?
I'd be prepared to be a leader. You can't get the country to go in the right direction and get Washington to work if you don't have a president that's a leader. And 3 years ago, we selected a person who'd never had any leadership experience, never worked in the private sector, never had the opportunity to actually bring people together, and he hasn't been able to do so. He said he'd bring us hope and change. Instead, he's divided the nation and tried to blame other people. The real course for America is to have someone who's a leader, who can identify people in both parties who care more about the country than they care about getting reelected. There are Democrats like that. There are Republicans like that. I was the governor of a state that had a few Democrats. People in this room know how many we had in Massachusetts.
So it's essential to deal with Democrats and be prepared to compromise on the big issues of our time?
You have to stand by your principles. At the same time, you know that good Democrats and good Republicans who love the country first will be able to find common ground from time to time and recognize we can't keep on spending like we're spending. We can't demand more from tax revenue from people because that kills jobs and hurts working families. We have got to help the middle class in this country. The only way that'll come together is if you have people on both sides of the aisle who listen to a leader who has the experience of leading, and that's what America's looking for and desperately longing for.
And back to Governor Perry, this plan that you would like to lay out, because Governor Romney has said you've had 2 months to produce a plan, an economic plan. He's had a 59-point plan. What's the plan? What will you say specifically?
Well, clearly opening up a lot of the areas of our domestic energy area. That's the real key. You've got an administration that, by and large, has either by intimidation or overregulation put our energy industry and the rest of the economy in jeopardy. And we've got to have a president who is willing to stand up and to clearly pull back those regulations that are strangling the American entrepreneurship that's out there. And it doesn't make any difference whether it's Obamacare, whether it's Dodd-Frank, or whether it's the tax burden. A president, particularly with the plan that I'm going to be laying out over the next 3 days, and I'm not going to lay it out all for you tonight. Mitt's had 6 years to be working on a plan. I've been in this for about 8 weeks. But clearly, we're going to be focused on, initially, the energy industry in this country and making America, again, independent and clearly the place where domestic energy needs to be produced from.
Let me introduce my friend Karen. Karen.
Congresswoman Bachmann, 3 years after the financial meltdown, Main Street continues to suffer. People have lost their jobs, they've lost their homes, they've lost their faith in the future. But Wall Street is thriving. The banks not only got bailed out by the government, they've made huge profits, they've paid themselves huge bonuses. Do you think it's right that no Wall Street executives have gone to jail for the damage they did to the economy?
Well, I think if you look at the problem with the economic meltdown, you can trace it right back to the federal government, because it was the federal government that demanded that banks and mortgage companies lower platinum-level lending standards to new lows.
But the federal government had also deregulated them.
It was the federal government that pushed the subprime loans. It was the federal government that pushed the Community Reinvestment Act. It was Congressman Barney Frank and also Senator Chris Dodd that continued to push government-directed housing goals. They pushed the banks to meet these rules. And if banks failed to meet those rules, then the federal government said, we won't let you merge. We won't let you grow. There's a real problem. It began with the federal government, and it began with Freddie and Fannie. If you look at these secondary mortgage companies, which the federal government is essentially backing 100%, they put American mortgages in a very difficult place. We had artificially low interest rates. Freddie and Fannie were the center of the universe on the mortgage meltdown, and we had lending standards lowered for the first time in American history. The fault goes back to the federal government, and that's what's wrong with Dodd-Frank. Dodd-Frank institutionalized all of these problems that were put into effect by the federal government. That's why I introduced the bill to repeal Dodd-Frank. It's the Jobs and Housing Destruction Act.
So, Speaker Gingrich, it sounds like Congresswoman Bachmann does not believe that Wall Street is to blame for the financial mess. You've said that the current protests on Wall Street are, in your words, the natural product of Obama's class warfare. Does this mean that these people who are out there protesting on Wall Street, across the country, have no grievance?
No, let me draw a distinction. I think virtually every American has a reason to be angry. I think virtually every American has a reason to be worried. I think the people who are protesting on Wall Street break into two groups. One is left-wing agitators who would be happy to show up next week on any other topic. And the other is sincere middle-class people who, frankly, are very close to the Tea Party people in actually caring. You can tell which group is which. The people who are decent, responsible citizens pick up after themselves. The people who are just out there as activists trash the place and walk off and are proud of having trashed it. So let's draw that distinction. If they want to really change things, the first person to fire is Bernanke, who is a disaster as chairman of the Federal Reserve. The second person to fire is Geithner. The fact is, in both the Bush and the Obama administrations, the fix has been in. And I think it's perfectly reasonable for people to be angry, but let's be clear who put the fix in. The fix was put in by the federal government. And if you want to put people in jail, I want to second what Michele said. You ought to start with Barney Frank and Chris Dodd, and let's look at the politicians who created the environment, the politicians who profited from the environment, and the politicians who put this country in trouble.
Clearly not saying they should go to jail.
Well, in Chris Dodd's case, go back and look at the countryside deals. In Barney Frank's case, go back and look at the lobbyists he was close to at Freddie Mac. All I'm saying is, so if you were everybody in the media who wants to go after the business community ought to start by going after the politicians who have been at the heart of the sickness which is weakening this country, and ought to start with Bernanke, who has still not been exposed for the hundreds of billions of dollars. I'm going to say one more thing. I want to repeat this. Bernanke has in secret spent hundreds of billions of dollars bailing out one group and not bailing out another group. I don't see anybody in the news media demanding the kind of transparency at the Fed that you would demand of every other aspect of the federal government. And I think it is corrupt and it is wrong for one man to have that kind of secret power.
So, Congressman Paul, where do you come down on this?
One thing I might say that we have made some inroads on the Federal Reserve. We passed a bill last year. We got a partial, audit of the Fed. We've learned a whole lot. They were dealing in $15 trillion. $5 trillion went overseas to bail out foreign banks. But you know what? Congress did a lot. I've worked on it for a good many years. But Bloomberg helped and Fox helped. They had court cases, Freedom of Information Act. And there are some, even at this table, who didn't think auditing the Fed was such a good idea, that we could call up the Fed and ask them, and they would tell us what they're doing. I've been calling them up for 30 years, and they never tell me. But we're getting to the bottom of it. But if you want to understand why we have a problem, you have to understand the Fed, because the cause comes from the business cycle. We shouldn't be asking what to do exactly with the recession. Obviously, we have to deal with that. But you can't cure the disease if you don't know the cause of it. And the cause is the booms. When there are booms, and they're artificial, whether it's the CRA or whether it's the Fed easy credit, when you have bubbles, whether it's the NASDAQ or whether it's the housing bubbles, they burst. And when they do, you have to have corrections, and that's what we're dealing with. And we can do this by building coalitions and not sacrificing any principles.
Julianna?
Thank you, Charlie. Senator Santorum, I want to turn to jobs, because you've said that when you were growing up in a steel town in Pennsylvania, 21% of the country was involved in manufacturing. Now it's down to 9%. Can those jobs ever return? And what would you do to create jobs now?
Yeah, the jobs can come back if you create a climate for them to be profitable. We have a lot of business people, manufacturers in Pennsylvania. I don't know a single one who wanted to ship their jobs offshore, who didn't want them in their own community to be able to employ people and see the fruits of their labor benefiting the community that they live in. What happened was we became uncompetitive. So we need to be competitive. And that's why I proposed taking the corporate tax for manufacturers and processors, taking it from 35% and eliminating it. 0% tax. Allow this to be the manufacturing capital of the world again. Take that money, $1.2 trillion that's overseas from manufacturers who did send their jobs overseas. Bring it back, 0% tax rate if you invest it in plant and equipment in this country. Repeal every regulation the Obama administration has put in place that's over $100 million. Repeal them all. May have to replace a few. Let's repeal them all because they're all antagonistic to businesses, particularly in the manufacturing sector, and do as Governor Perry suggested. We need a bold energy plan. I put one out there to drill Pennsylvania. I don't want to brag, Governor, but Pennsylvania is the gas capital of the world right now, not Texas, because we are doing a great job, and energy prices and gas went down by 75%.
Let me just follow up, because we are in a crisis. So what would you do right now to create jobs?
The cool thing about my plan, as opposed to Herman's plans and some of the other plans out here, it'll pass tomorrow. It would pass tomorrow. Why? Because industrial state Democrats want